CEO of Trilogy Metals. One of the viewers wanted to know what exactly is the relationship. You were talking about the partners in that, the relationship of Trilogy with Ambler Metals. How does that work?
Sure. Trilogy owns 50% of Ambler Metals. Up until South 32 made its investment to acquire 50% interest, we owned 100%. So in January of 2020, that's when we closed the deal with South 32, and that's when they invested $145 million into Ambler Metals for a 50% interest. So when I talk about the feasibility study, I'm talking about it on a 100% basis associated with the Arctic project. But that's how the ownership works. So we each own 50-50, and South 32, in addition, owns 11.5% of Trilogy Metals as a shareholder. They have no representation on the board at all.
Right, and currently, who's operating the joint venture? Is it between the both of you, or?
Yeah, so as I said, 2020 was a big year. We put in a management team at the JV, and it's a totally independent management team. So all of the Trilogy personnel that were in Alaska have been moved into the JV, so the exploration, permitting, camp operations people. And then we've hired out a management team during the course of 2020. And Ramsey Faraz is the person who's heading up Ambler Metals. He's the CEO of Ambler Metals. He was formerly a senior projects person, a VP projects person with Newmont for 8 years. And prior to that, he had a long career with Shell in Canada and elsewhere. So he has a lot of project development experience, a lot of native experience. And he's the person that's heading up a team, and he's basically been building out the management team for Ambler Metals. And so it's totally independent of Trilogy and South 32.
And you were saying something just finally about how much money that South 32 put into the project, such that the budgets in the next few years are being spent by them. So that money is not coming out of your pockets right now.
Yeah, so right now, as I said, the JV has effectively cash and receivables of about $145 million, maybe a little less than that right now, but it's enough to see us through the next 4 to 5 years, depending on what the spend is. I think the one item that isn't clear yet, and which hopefully will be shortly, is we're going to co-fund some of the feasibility study work associated with the road, and that will come out of the 145. But the way we're looking at our budgets, we sort of see that cash being available to us till 2024, possibly 2025, depending on where we go. And up until that point, neither ourselves or South 32 will have to fund any portion of the capital budgets associated with Ambler.
All right, thanks. Moving on to clean air, we got a question about, Current Lake was looked at as an open pit, which you guys remarked on by Panoramic. And when you, Jim, looked at it as North American Palladium, you thought, well, that doesn't make much sense. And now you're looking at from an underground perspective. I guess what's the difference? What should we look forward to seeing in terms of how that resource is developed between open pit and underground?
Yeah, so at this point in time, we do not intend to develop an open pit. We know we will lose some of the resource under the lake, but when you look at the timelines to production, at least 2 to 3 years longer in permitting, because you do have to do fish studies and a whole bunch of other additional work to support and then replace the water and the fish habitat that you will be taking out. Then you have to do a pre-strip, years and significant upfront capital over and above what is a relatively low upfront capital. As I mentioned in the presentation, we literally only have to get 70 meters underground with initially a single ramp. Ultimately, we will have a double ramp system. At least that's the current concept that we're thinking about. So, the trade-off is a risky, stakeholder, risk-averse approach with an open pit with many more years and higher capital, or let's just get into the ore with the underground ramp.
Right. Just mining underground, under the lakes. Is that the resource you lose by the crown pillar required under the lake?
Yeah, we've already gone as far to have some expert geotech opinions at a high level, albeit, and we'll be doing additional studies. We've established a minimum 30-meter crown pillar under the portions, and probably once we publish the PEA, we'll have excluded anything that falls above that. As I say, somewhere down the road, 15 years, 20 years from now, some mining engineer will be looking at how to recover that bit that we leave under the lake. But it is relatively narrow. So when I think when we get to publish the resource, we'll see that the material we're losing under the lake is not really detrimental to the project at all. There's a lot of good stuff that's at the tail end of the lake and further and deeper down to 600 meters, and it's still open from there.
Okay, thanks. And to John Black of Regulus Resources, you were talking about, all the different mines that are around where you're working, the different partnerships, the different companies, which are all majors, and you're the only junior. And then you brought in, basically what Yanacocha or Newmont and Buenaventura are doing at the Yanacocha deposit, which is a bit of a ways. But how does that all intermingle to potentially looking at developing this Antiquary project, combined with what the Coimolache people have?
Great question, Joe. What we see in the district or in the region overall is we see quite a large number of both copper and gold deposits. There's some straight up gold or straight up copper porphyries, but the tops of those and also many systems that are true high sulfidation systems have copper gold sulfides, but they're arsenical in nature. So great grade, large volumes, low strips, outstanding opportunities that way, but they do present challenges on how to handle that arsenic component to it. And Yanacocha for decades now has had tremendously high rates of production from the heap leaching of the oxides, but those are largely exhausted now, and they're just at the transition point where they'll begin to develop their copper gold sulfides by bringing in a large autoclave to handle that. And the nice part about autoclave technology is, as some of our other speakers have pointed out, more for the nickel side of it, but it works pretty well for gold, for refractory gold systems, is that it sequesters the arsenic into a stable mineral called scorodite. It's safe to store and easy to store. So it's an environmentally friendly way to handle, much better than smelting, for example, to handle the arsenic. And you can capture that arsenic, separate it out. You actually get better recoveries of both your copper and your gold mineralization on it. And you avoid having to transport large amounts of concentrate out to the coast. So we think it's a very good technology to tackle these more arsenical rich copper gold sulfides like we're developing on our project. But to be able to handle that, you have to handle additional CapEx and OpEx that's associated with that. And so to do that, you need a large deposit with good grade and a low strip. And that's exactly what we're beginning to reveal on the project we're on. So we're looking very much to Yanacocha. We'd like to see them get that put in. They'll make their go-ahead decision on it this year. They've completed their environmental permitting. They've completed their feasibility work on it, and they're working with their partnership on how to complete the financing it. But it'll set a great pathway forward for what I think will be the eventual way that the mineralization we have will be tackled in a few years down the road.
All right, thanks, John. To Scott Williamson, CEO of Blackstone. Like what I'm seeing with a lot of these, companies that are building, the metals for the battery, the electric vehicles, some of them want to continue to go downstream because, as you point out, there's a premium to be had by doing that extra work. So that vertical integration and your relationship with EcoPro, has that sort of morphed Blackstone into something else?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's a really massive opportunity for us because we're seeing the significant demand for these downstream products, and through that partnership with EcoPro, whereby they're not just looking to bring funding, but also the technical expertise to convert into these downstream products. So what our flow sheet allows us to do is not just access concentrate from the Tarkwa project. We can access concentrate from anywhere in the world and upgrade it. So it's a really great opportunity because there's no lack of demand on the lithium-ion battery electric vehicle front, and as long as we can access nickel concentrate, which can be difficult, but there are opportunities out there. So we're really looking at potentially upscaling that opportunity, which is downstream. So accessing third-party nickel concentrate really sort of moves us towards more of an industrial type of investment, really, because we're not, I suppose, linked to the mine life and the mine permitting and the upstream component of our business. So yeah, it is an opportunity that we're looking at, and particularly because there's just so much demand for these downstream products coming.
Another question is like Vietnam, what's the comparative advantage of having that plant and the downstream in Vietnam?
Yeah, because we're on the doorstep of the major players, being China, South Korea, and Japan. So we're and the other key thing is this hydropower plant. So not many nickel mines are built with hydropower. So it allows us to put ourselves at the front of the line for the OEMs. So the OEMs are going to ask for green nickel. They're going to ask for renewable power source nickel. So it's the hydropower, but on the doorstep of the major players, but also the very competitive labour costs as well. So because we've got the very low labour costs associated with the jurisdiction, combined with the renewable power, which is very low power costs, it puts us in a great position and right on the doorstep of the major players.
And finally, I mean, you were talking to me, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about this level of urgency right now in South Korea or, in Asia. What is that related?
Yeah, it's so the real crunch time comes in 2023, but I think it's just sunk in today in 2021 that we're only 2 years away from what is this movement towards EV. So very quickly we'll be moving towards EVs in 2023 into 2025. This is happening very aggressively. What's happened is that the OEMs are saying, yes, we want to move into electric vehicles. The battery players are saying, yes, we will feed in the batteries. They're going to the cathode manufacturers. Yes, we will give you cathode. All of a sudden, the cathode manufacturers are wondering where we're going to get all the nickel from. So this is not just on the nickel side. It's an issue on the lithium side. Lithium being a little bit more, I suppose, abundant and potentially easier to access. But nickel sulfide in particular, at the current nickel prices, are a lot more difficult to access than, say, nickel laterite or nickel or lithium asset. So they've realized that the scarcity of nickel sulfide and the ability to turn these mines on is a difficult process. So particularly if we went into nickel laterites, you've got long lead times into production. So there's this sort of urgency around. They've just realized there isn't enough nickel, and it's a great position to be in as a potential downstream supplier of the products.
Okay. Well, back to copper with Trilogy. I mean, Trilogy, in terms of this session, is the only company with an asset in the U.S. So I guess my question is like the changing of the guard and the Biden presidency, how, and you being in the middle of permitting or just submitting your permit for the Arctic deposit, how do you see that impacting potentially your timeline as you see it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we get asked that question a fair bit. I think when we were looking at the election, one of the things that was clearly stated by the Biden team was how they were looking at, the need for strategic metals, and copper being one of those, and having domestic production of those. So we continue to believe that there continues to be significant support within the administration for responsible development of mines and operations in the U.S. We certainly have great state support at the state level and with the federal politicians in the state. And even though we're looking at a 50-50 Senate, we think that there's going to be a lot of working, hopefully across the aisle, to advance the various agendas and infrastructure development, and that should play well into the copper side. As I said earlier, when I was making my comments, we're looking at a timeline of ballpark 30 to 36 months on the permitting front, and it's mostly driven by state permitting, with really just one 404 wetlands permit, which will be required. So, we're optimistic that there won't be a major impact on our ability to advance a project, particularly given that we're going to be producing copper and zinc, which are very needed. And then I think the last point that I make is just with respect to the state of Alaska. I think the financial situation there has changed somewhat. Obviously, there's been significantly less, and looks like there'll continue to be less exploration on the oil and gas side. With COVID, the tourism sector has been hurt substantially, as has commercial fishing. So I think once again, there's an opportunity for responsible development of mines. And I think that we're in a strong position given that we have a partner like NANA who will have either an equity stake in the mines or certainly a financial stake in the mines. And given that they'll be our economic partner, we think that that goes a long way towards helping us in terms of, regardless of whether it's a Biden administration or if it's a Republican administration. So we don't think it's going to be an issue.
All right. Just on clean air, with Jim and or Abraham. Ontario officially, I guess, is shut down. How do you manage your program in 2021 under these conditions?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So Ontario is shut down for the most part, in addition to many other jurisdictions. But the interesting thing is that they've also defined a list of essential services, and that includes exploration and mining and companies involved in the global mineral supply chain. So we do have the right to work safely and carefully. We do have a COVID policy, and that's been updated from last year. I mean, this has been going on since March now. And quite frankly, we've never taken our masks off. I'm sitting alone in my boardroom at the moment, so that's allowed. But, masking, physical distancing, self-isolation, and so forth, these policies are all in place. We publish them on our press release, the policy on our press releases. We will start drilling next week, and we're gearing up to get that going.
Great, thanks. I guess I missed GBM on my loop. So my question for GBM is like your flagship assets, obviously your assets in the Bowen Basin. So those were sitting, I guess, all segmented, but you're managing to consolidate that. So I want to understand, like, what's your comparative advantage of being able to actually do that in a rising gold price environment when I would have thought there would be more interest in these projects?
Yeah, Joe, I think one of the advantages is we sort of had a footprint there, and we started negotiating with a couple of the assets early, like 12, 18 months ago. One asset, in fact, we were negotiating 2.5 years ago, and the sort of deal got stranded and sidetracked, but that deal's still sort of on the table, and we're trying to resurrect that. And now we've got a dominant position with Yandan and having that good infrastructure sort of base. I think there'll always be competition for assets, but we've picked up a lot of new ground, and then having the dominant position at the moment, at least in the northern part of the basin. There's a few other projects further south that we haven't really been talking to, but well south of Twin Hills there's a few other projects, but I think we're in a good position to get some more.
And in terms of analog for people that don't know the Bowen Basin that well, is Pajingo the ideal sort of low sulfidation epithermal system, Steve, in that area?
Yeah, Joe, just to make sure we don't geographically confuse people, the Bowen Basin is coking coal. We're Drummond Basin, epithermal gold. So sorry, but yeah, look,
yes, you guys.
As you know, I have a long history of exploring low sulfidation systems in different parts of the world. The Drummond Basin really has a number of million-ounce deposits, of which Yandan is now there with its resources, and we hope that we can grow the Mount Coolon district. But the largest one in the basin is Pajingo, and it's produced historically now for over 20 years and has a combined production and reserves around about 5 million ounces of gold. So, really quite significant systems. I think globally, if you look at the Drummond Basin, it's really underperformed from a discovery perspective. There's sort of 5 million ounce deposit and then a couple of million ounce deposits. We firmly believe that that's just a matter of exploration. A lot of this area has been locked up for various reasons over the last 20 years and really hasn't had any modern exploration. And it's something that we view as a real opportunity for GBM to grow that plus million ounce resource base from the existing resources, and through the skill sets of Peter and his team, actually bring them into production, as he's demonstrated he can do with White Dam. But the exploration team's pretty excited about the opportunity up there, and we currently have something in the order of 10 epithermal systems that we control, and we are not stopping yet. So we'll have a very, very strong portfolio of systems that have produced significant ore-grade mineralization, but really underexplored.
Thank you. One Q&A question we got from the audience for John Black, Regulus. You were talking about the drilling being suspended because there was a group in terms of your previous press releases that was, worried about the water in a drainage basin that was on the other side of where you're actually currently working. You're sort of thinking right now you'll hope to be back to drilling in next month, but they point out that you were talking about putting together a water study. Has that been done and provided to these people to basically point out that the drainage basin they're talking about has nothing to do with where you are?
I can provide a little more context for that. And part of what we experience is common in projects where you see a natural evolution. When you start to work, you draw interest from people from slightly farther afield. We have agreements with a direct area of influence for our project to allow our work to go forward, and the people in that direct area of influence benefit greatly from employment and other opportunities. As we begin to work and become more visible, we're one of the few projects that's doing exploration in the Cajamarca region right now. Groups from slightly farther afield want to know more about what we're doing, either out of concern how it might affect them negatively or how there might be potential benefits for them. And one of the groups approached the situation by pointing out that there was a coloration change in a small reservoir at a distance away from the project, and they felt that might be related to our drilling and that we were causing some negative impacts on that water, and therefore they should receive some type of compensation for it. It's physically impossible that we're affecting that. One, the coloration change started well before we started drilling, and the lake is at a higher elevation than where we're drilling at, and it's in a completely different watershed. So we're quite certain that our drilling is not in any manner negatively affecting that water. But we're concerned that there's something that's going on there, and we'd like to help them understand. So we volunteered to provide our technical people to help understand this, or even financing for third parties to investigate it to see what's going on. We're doing that because we're very confident that it won't show that it's related to us whatsoever at all. And as we've communicated that's much more widely accepted by everybody now. When an accusation like that or an allegation like that's made, a lot of times it quickly kind of wears badly on the company. And that's why we decided to stop drilling until we had everybody understanding. We didn't want that to blow out of proportion, particularly in an environment when we have strong restrictions of how we interact with the groups and how we get together with the groups due to COVID protocols, as well as kind of a politically charged presidential election cycle right now in Peru. So that's going well in terms of communicating to everybody that it's not related to us. It's a little bit more of a challenge on getting the studies done to show what exactly is happening in the lake, because as we unwrap it a bit more, it involves which government authorities approve the lake to go forward and what type of test work's being done on that. And so we're helping a multitude of parties determine who should complete that study and how it should be financed and exactly what it should investigate beyond just the technical aspects of the project. But we're making good progress on that. It'll be a little while before that's done. We won't have to wait for that study to be done for us to be able to start our drilling.
Okay, because you've gone beyond proving that you impact that, because it's sort of nonsensical that it's actually the case. What you're trying to do is help them to find out what exactly is going on.
Exactly, but in a bigger context too, it's opened up people that want to see what type of benefits they can get that are sometimes located a little bit farther away from them. They're too far from the project for us to provide direct employment to. But it's been a good opportunity. We determined it was best for us to stop, kind of step back and look at a more long-term sustainable option on the project. We could have kept drilling, but we would have been very distracted and potentially putting ourselves and other community members at risk of exposure to COVID if we pushed on that. And so it's allowing us to address, in concert with some government agencies as well, about the benefits that a development of a large mine can provide for the much greater area. Sometimes those aren't easy for people to see. So we're helping various communities and government authorities understand those benefits in a greater context. And that's going well. It takes a little while. It's a lot of virtual meetings these days. The same challenges we face as explorationists, we face as challenges on how we safely meet with government authorities and community authorities right now. But we're making progress on that pretty well.
Great, fantastic. And so with that ends our session, our afternoon session with the first installment of the Metals Investment Forum in January. I thank all our CEOs and managing directors from the 5 companies listed on the TSX and the ASX, all the way from Canada down to Australia. So thanks very much, gentlemen. And I'll say goodbye from Joe Mazumdar, editor-analyst at Exploration Insights. Thank you very much for joining us.